Welcome back to Easily Explained, where today we will be talking about the 4 types of learned behavior. So let's get started. So in the last video, we mentioned 4 different types of learned behaviors, and today we're going to be talking more in depth about each and every one of them. But as a recap, the 4 types of learned behavior are habituation, classical conditioning, operant conditioning, and lastly, insight learning. So let's dive deeper into each of the 4 major types of learned behaviors and learn what each of them mean and what each of them are showing. First up is habituation. Habituation is the process where an animal either starts to stop or stops its response to a repeating stimulus that it has learned is not beneficial or harmful to it. This allows the animal to save its energy and use that in case a stimulus actually occurs that is going to benefit or harm it. And it is the simplest type of learning, so most animals will be able to undergo habituation. So an example would be when a new pet is introduced to its owner's phone call ringtone for the very first time. So initially it's going to have a response because it's going to wonder, is this going to hurt me in any way? But when the stimulus keeps repeating, the pet will eventually learn that it's not going to help or harm me, so it's going to stop responding, and from that it'll conserve that energy for a stimulus that might actually affect it. Next up, we have classical conditioning. Classical conditioning is when an animal starts to make a connection between a stimulus and a reward or punishment. For example, every time a dog sees its owner's keys, seeing its owner pick up their keys, a car ride follows. So, once this action has been repeated for some time, the dog can make a mental connection between the owner picking up their keys and going for a car ride. So anytime the owner is picking up the keys, if the dog enjoys a car ride, it might start wagging its tail. But because it has now made a connection between the stimulus and a reward that's about to follow. Our third, second to last type of learned behavior is called operant conditioning. Operant conditioning is kind of what we see more of when we think of training a dog, for example. This is when an animal learns behaviors through repeated practice to receive a reward. It first starts off with a random behavior that is then rewarded or maybe punished. And then some trial and error will occur and until that animal learns that specific behavior is the one that will give them the treat or the punishment. And we have an example of operant conditioning. The owner gives a treat every time the dog rolls over. So at first the dog is probably a little bit confused. It's doing different behaviors, trying to see which one is going to give me this treat. And after a lot of trial and error, it'll learn that whenever it wants a treat, it should roll over. Or if its owner asks it to roll over, and it does, it will get a treat. And the very last of the 4 major types of learned behaviors is called insight learning. Insight learning is when an animal actually uses reasoning to act a certain way, and not the reasoning as in connecting a certain stimulus to a reward or punishment, or deciding to behave a certain way through repeated practice, but It is using reasoning without any trial or error, and it's on a much deeper level than just connection of a stimuli and a response. So it is the most complex, and this is more of what you expect from primates and humans. So there's no period of trial and error. The time that the animal is in that situation, it uses the reasoning to act a certain way without any other practice. So, for example, a chimpanzee stacked a bunch of boxes together to reach a bunch of bananas that was hanging above it. Whereas some other animals, if they are found in some sort of situation, they probably might not think of stacking boxes together because they're not using reasoning to act that way. And not all animals are able to use insight learning. It occurs only when an animal is able to apply something that it's learned to another situation that's not the same. Congratulations, you are now an expert at the 4 types of learned behaviors. We hope this video really helped, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye!